Welcome back to the Gymnazo Podcast. I am your host, CJ Kobliska, and we have some fun events coming up here at Gymnazo in the next few months. Coming up in August, we have our 2-day, 3-dimensional movement workshop, diving in deep into experiential learning with movement with our fellow kinesiologists here at Gymnazo. We're diving into all things 3D and spherical, ways to implement the spherical movement into warm-ups, into workouts, into cool downs and stretches, and nice mobility sessions and mindful movement. It's gonna be a fun opportunity. Got a lot of awesome sponsors and prizes that can be coming out during that weekend. So hope to see you there. It's a great time to connect and network and thrive as a community of explorers and movers and pioneers in the industry. And speaking of pioneers in the industry, we are going to be guided today by Sean Pearse in this conversation. He is a movement coach and fellow explorer, and again, pioneer in movement, doing all things flow and beyond. It is a pleasure to have you on, Sean.
Thanks, CJ. It's awesome to be back.
Yes, for a second time on the podcast with hopefully some improved sound. We had a great time just figuring that out through Zoom. Usually it's a smooth process, but for whatever reason, the universe challenges us to find the best way to share our voice, and we are here now. So I heard Sean was doing a little rope flow to get the juices flowing this morning. You want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing before this talk?
Yeah, absolutely. Rope flow has been something more new compared to other tools that I've been exploring with. Got a rope, I think, a year ago, and got sent one and picked it up a few times, put it down, wasn't quite feeling the mojo of how we can move with it. But in recent times, it's been a beautiful tool for experiencing more ways that the body can move, moving a little more 3D, and then tapping into really unique rhythm that the rope specifically offers, because it's much longer than other flow tools like a mace or a kettlebell or whatever other tools people flow with. So this morning before the podcast, it was a beautiful setting, popped outside, sun's out, it's a gorgeous day. Sun just started coming out here in Victoria, BC, up in Canada. Barefoot on the ground, and just had a really lovely time connecting with slower movements with the rope. And coming into this, I always get a little jittery upon doing new things, podcasts, if that's new workshops. I've learned to really love that feeling of excitement, like that mix of nervousness and excitement that comes up. So it's really beautiful to tap in with the rope, because it's been a beautiful entry into a much more meditative state of mind, much more peripheral state of mind where I'm not literally focused in on one thing. And I think that was a beautiful way to then reset, get a little more present, feel into the body much more, and then come back up and jump on the podcast. So rope's been really cool tool recently.
Yeah, it's something, I mean, I see you swinging the kettlebell around in very intentional paths and patterns, and you've got to be so focused on where the hand is going to be, whether you're looking at it or not. You know where that hand needs to be, where that bell's going to go somewhere chaotic.
Yep.
But yeah, find the rope, man, is something so connective. It's the tether that kind of ties it all together. I feel like it's, I mean, I've been exploring it for a handful of years now, and when I was learning it, I was doing it every single day, and I found myself in times doing it for hours when I had the space to do it, and just the calming, the connecting, the settling into, you know, whatever the pattern or path the rope is taking, and then being able to guide it in a different direction, or with different speeds, or you know, with even like how it dances in your hands too. You got, you know, a full grip, or you might have just some fingers holding. And I find myself often in the shakas and rolling those around. When did you start learning the rope, and how did you pick up that skill?
Yeah, I love that. I was going to ask you a question. Maybe you can answer afterwards. So, what drove you to keep learning the rope? Maybe I'll enter that one first, and then I'll throw it back at you. Like, what was that drive to explore? If it was complexity or if it was speed or the sense of embodied connection. I'm super curious about that because I feel it's a special tool for connecting with oneself. I got sent a rope, like I was saying, about a year ago, and seeing other people flow. There's these tools that you see people flowing with online. There's a mace, beautifully flowing with kettlebell, maybe a little newer in like the flow scene, especially now with juggling involving. And there's the rope. And I love the way people move in certain disciplines. Not how much weight they can move, but there's a quality of fluidity and a quality of almost some embodiedness that I see people move with where I'm like, that's really cool. So that's usually what attracts me to any tool. It's like I like the way I feel that person's state of being is as they move. Really grasp onto that. And so picked up the rope. It was difficult at first. It's a different coordination. It's almost like playing the piano. You're working with two hands simultaneously as opposed to one with the kettlebell or the mace. And yes, there's two-handed movements, but the rope is something interesting because it's all connected to the body. We're spiraling out one way and spiraling back the other way, and the whole body's working together. I love to explore on my own for the first portion of learning something new. I find play and having fun is so pivotal to sustaining a drive towards doing something better or more in depth or consistently. And so with the rope, I picked it up, didn't have that much of a natural curiosity towards it at first. And then, so put it down for a while, probably a good like 6 months. Then about 4 months ago, I just picked it up again, seeing again people flow with it and be like, oh, there is something there that I really, really dig. So I started exploring it. I learned a lot by watching, not so much absorbing the skills, although that is part of it, like the specific skills that people do, but more so again that state of being, like Edward, is it Troy's?
Yeah.
Troy's,
So.
yeah, yeah. So him, um, there's a couple of really, really great people I saw who was just like, the tempo of him moving, the rhythm of him moving, the presence and the poise. It's like, that's something that I'm going to embody first. And then I'll start moving the rope and see how that feels. So, sort of like a state of being first, absorbing that, and then seeing what evolves. And you connect to like the specific nature of the rope. Learned a lot myself and then popped on Tim Sheaf's program, Way of the Rope. He has a really great beginner program and found it was great just to revisit the fundamentals in more depth and refinement. Actually learn the names, because when I start learning something new, I don't pay attention to the names of the skills. I find that it makes me occupy my mind too much instead of, all right, I'm going to drop down. I'll learn the names later, but I want to feel into it first. Learned the fundamentals, and then since then it's just been a exploration of like watching people slowly figuring things out. That mic release where you release the end and you whip it around. I practiced that for probably 15 hours in the last month straight, just like over and over and over again. And it's fascinating tapping into that state of the learning process where everything's feedback and just every repetition is deliberate in trying to be more intentional. For me, it comes down to where is there tension that's not needed or a sense of rigidity in my movement where it's like, this could be a little smoother. This could be a little more connected, and just slowly and slowly fine tuning that until everything sort of clicks together. And then the movement came like 4 days ago, and I've been stoked. I've been tying it to other movements, and that's the process of learning I love. So that's my rope flow journey thus far. Got a lot to learn, but it's just been an incredibly fun tool.
Yeah, that video you shared of you doing the mic releases and I mean, in some quick movements, man, I mean, it was quite impressive. I'm still trying to figure mine out, and I don't put enough time into it. I know that. I'm like, God, dude, everybody's getting this dialed in and downloaded.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's time put in, and now it's being shared, and it's so precise. I mean, I know the process.
Mm,
You know, when you share something, you're like, hey,
mm,
it's more fun to share the precision and the beauty once it's been dialed in and continue to be
mm,
refined. But that sloppy, dirty process of the
mm,
fine tuning. Okay, where do I need to get a little bit more from my wrist, or a little? Oh, my finger's not even throwing. Like I'm just trying to throw with my
mm,
palm. Or
mm,
okay, now I sense that I'm just using my arm. I need to use a little bit more of my thoracic spine, a little bit of my hip, and what's just the right amount of whip that it sends it, and I know it's going to be in the same place every single time. It's uh, there's an honor there, you know, of the
mm,
time that's
mm,
been put in that doesn't just show up. It's the skill that
mm.
requires you to be in tune with it.
Absolutely. It's a humbling. They're all humbling tools, but I think there's so much opportunity for self cultivation or self awareness, where I think so many of these tools bridge um, physical benefits to emotional benefits and spiritual benefits and benefits beyond even the body, in the sense that we're really having to somatically drop in and learn about where we're storing tension or blocks, or where we're not conscious of a part of the body or a movement that could be tapped into more to create more self-awareness, literally. And that's an exploration I'm continuing to really dive into, seeing where all of these tools intersect with unique ways of making what's unconscious in the body conscious.
When did you start recognizing this interconnectedness? It's a physical skill, right? On the outside, it's very
Mm,
external, but there is a lot of development that goes on in our own human as we try to figure out
mm,
why is this not being smooth? Why is this? We know it's the reps and it's the awareness, but for you, starting to tap in, you know, you get that dopamine rush of you. Okay, you caught one.
mm,
All right, I'm here now. I've had a checkpoint, and you miss a whole bunch more, and then you get it again and again. Um, I know you go into a lot more personally and somatically in that experience, and it comes with a practice of not just
mm,
the rope, with any tool, with any modality, and you don't even need a modality, just doing it through the yoga of your motion. Uh,
mm,
when did you start to realize this deeper connection, or at least realize the other payouts besides just downloading a skill and having some cool tricks up your sleeve? That's paid off in, you know, how you view your life, how you go about your day, how you view your practices. What was that?
mm.
Those moments, if you don't mind sharing a few of them, if it was with the rope or with another tool or just a movement, that you felt like, okay, I'm kind of tapping into an interconnected software in a sense
Mm.
here. What was that process like in recognition?
Yeah, I love that we're diving into this territory right off the bat. Because it is something I know and I feel that there's so much more depth, so to speak, to movement, and a lot of people pay mind to. Um, Not that it's needed, not that you need to make a point of continuously diving deeper and deeper into more meaningful layers of movement. Movements enjoyable from all different layers, but there's something really rich that if we intend to explore, can offer a lot back. So for me, I think it was a bit of an intersection. I always loved doing the cool shit. You know, I was a kid in high school who would pop out backflips and at dances and like do cool stuff. I was athletically gifted when I was younger, and I learned the windmill, breakdance windmill, just for sheer fact that I wanted to do something that looked that cool. So I just practice, practice, practice. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, I think it was an intertwining of a lot of personal development work. So a lot of connecting with myself somatically. I've been a part of various men's groups, programs led by some amazing men that specifically look at connecting to your somatic experience. Somatic psychotherapy. I had a wonderful somatic psychotherapist I worked with for a year and a bit. We traded sessions, which was so cool. I would teach her movement, mace, kettlebells, and she would teach me how to connect and how to process all the unconscious tensions and stuff inside of myself. And that was a really interesting interpoint of like seeing movement as an experience inside of oneself instead of externally how it looks. So there's an internal experience, and then there's how something looks. People only see how stuff looks, and there's less of that connection into what someone's feeling. But some people can express that, like Leo Savage, I think of with the mace. And you can see the emotion, you can see his internal experience sort of bubbling out as he moves. And I love that. So a lot of development work on myself, sort of learning how to connect with myself. And then that evolved into my movement practice, where the main intention became, can we slow down and do everything just a little bit more deliberately and intentional? Juggling was, I think, by far the practice that made me really tune into that, because you have to be so aware of exactly how much spin you're putting on the handle. If you're doing one flip, you only want to do one flip. And so you tune into the sensation of one perfect rotation, not 1.5 or 1 3/4. It's like dialing it in and refining it. If you want to do 2 or 3, 4, 5, or 6, it's like finding that dial and precision. And then because we're moving the bell around in so much spherical space around us, there's just so many opportunities to dial in more awareness and I don't know if this is a word, but exactness of what we're doing. And so they went hand in hand. Times when I've injured myself, I've been moving too fast. And I've always experienced the most joy in movement when there's a slowing down and a focus on that intentionality, which for me represents flow, or the state of moving fluid. I don't know if I don't even remember your question, but here we go.
What question?
What question?
No, it's great. And I think it ties into what I see on your shirt, the Tao kettlebell.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you? Because I mean, I've got my practice and read in philosophy of the I Ching and
Mhm.
dove into myself in that process of just understanding
Mhm.
many elements that are all converging into this central energy, or this flow state. I feel like they go hand in
Mhm.
hand in that sense of when
Mhm.
you're there, but it's also a fine line. It's a thread to walk or a thread to climb of
Mhm.
connection with what we're doing, what we're intending to do, and then what's arising in that process. And this kind of like threefold conversation that goes on, especially when you have a modality that you're using, like a kettlebell or a mace or a rope. Um, that kind of helps us externalize and internalize a connection to all that's going on, and with the forces that are
Mhm.
acting upon us and within us, and the force that we're able to act upon and create as well. What is that Tao of kettlebell, and where did that come from?
Yeah, I love that. Continues to unfold too, the meaning of it and the tying of those together. I was also playing around with Tao, the art of, so TAO, the art of kettlebell. I always wanted to create a brand, which is now my brand of the art of kettlebell. In the Tao, I've read the Tao Te Ching numerous times. It's a philosophy in a way of being, more so, that I feel is really essential to my foundations of how I want to live, and live in the sense of living in more of this flow and acceptance of life and all that is. Um, there's a lot of different components that all sort of channel into, again, a state of being that can be represented by a sense of flow when we're moving. This effortless way of going about our movements where we're meeting resistance exactly. We're meeting, a bell moving or a tool moving without too much tension or too much relaxation. So there's this yin yang component that I speak about a lot with students of mine or workshops I give of as we're moving, as we're connecting with ourselves or life itself, can we meet it with a degree of relaxation, but then also this sort of positive tension? Like when we're moving with the bell, we can't be fully flexed as we move with the bell. We don't need to store excess tension in our grip, in our arm, therefore our whole body. You also don't want to be too lax or slack because we're going to be pulled around like a puppet. So there's a meeting point of this equal tension throughout the movement that gives this beautiful sense of a fluidity, and it from the outside looks like very smooth movement. In the Tao represents that best for me of finding this non-dual state of being centered. I like that word that you said, like this centralizing energy or states of incorporating both and not living too extreme on either end. I think people take either directions, even in fitness or all of life, where there's full grind mode, full tension, full lifting, and you can see it. And then there's the opposite, where it might be full flexibility or full flow without any adding of tension or intentional weight into the body. And so both are beautiful. I'd never discard either or. But I found a lot of joy trying to see how we can mix these together. Bruce Lee wrote a book that I was really inspired by too, called The Art of Kung Fu. Really phenomenal book. It was about martial arts, but he touched on the Tao and how it was related to martial arts, and how there's this principle of defeating your opponent with minimal resistance, and everything that an opponent throws at you, you're equally taking in and then giving back. And there's this way of being in fighting that is never excessive. It's never, you're never using too much tension, too much force, too much momentum. There is an engagement with the present moment and what's required of you, no more, no less. And so the Tao, I think, represents that artistic way of going about movement, a more intentional way about going about movement, where we are also cultivating the self and awareness as opposed to just moving things from a physical perspective, very pretty. And so it continues to evolve, though. I find it's something I continue to learn about, but it's the most accurate state of being that I found reading the Tao Te Ching, and people speak about their experience with and about the Tao. That resonates very deep. I'm still articulating and tying into kettlebell work or movement in general.
The art of becomes the articulation of.
Exactly.
Through the art, right? Through the practice.
Mm-hmm.
As you're talking about those things, it just for carrying over to life scenarios. I mean, outside of the movement, outside of the intentional practice, I find that the more I read and have this state of awareness that's in that play of kind of the in between, and recognizing when there is an extreme, then there's nothing wrong to it, but it's kind of how long
Mm-hmm.
or how much attention are we putting to one side of that spectrum or the other. And it really is full circle. I mean, you start to recognize as you play in the extremes of it, that you do have that lax and you have that rigidity at your fingertips. Literally, it's
Mm-hmm.
there, right? And it can start there at the touch. And then that response your body has is somewhere in the middle. And depending on how we practice physically, that's kind of how we carry ourselves in a sense. And I see a lot of these common themes of if you find yourself in one camp, there's a lot to be gained in that space until there isn't. And then I see a lot of stagnation, plateaus, and a lack of growth, not in the sense of just going upward, but just outward and expanding this awareness, and saying, if I'm in this camp or this camp, that this is where I stay and this is what I do. But we have access to it in this life. That there's so much gratitude to be shared in that space, especially as you transition from one extreme to another, and then start to balance yourself out. I feel like a lot of people are finding that as they go through injury or some big setback, that they have to, their body is asking them to go the other direction in some way, shape, or form. And then to reflect and find, those 2 points of where was I, where am I right now, and where do I want to be, and playing in that space of, well, actually, I don't know. And that's like a beautiful space to be, is in that unknown. And then just
Yes.
taking the next day, one day at a time, one practice at a time, and letting that continue to evolve, and then recycling and coming back through, and always kind of finding our place in between. And I find that when I'm hanging out with my wife and my daughter and my dogs, there's this, when we're in this state together, there's this freedom, this playfulness, new conversations arise. Or I watch my little girl do something, and I'm like, I start to join her, and my wife starts to join her, and the dogs are playing, and it kind of creates this fun whirlwind of
Beautiful.
uh, connectedness and joy, that it's like I want to hold on to it, right? I'm like, all right, maximize this situation. Like, no, just be in this space. Like the universe has now provided this opportunity, and you're paying attention. I'm paying attention, and if we're all just paying attention, that we can carry this with us into the next environment that we go into. We're going to a restaurant, or going downtown, or hanging out in the house. It's this kind of this constant flow that we can recognize and tap into based on how we physically practice, and watch it carry over and drip into our somewhat unconscious experience. But as we pay attention to it, those unconscious beautiful things start to just become apparent, that have always been there, but because of the state of mind, uh, it's almost as if the environment becomes alive. It's all there at your fingertips to enjoy and to process with. Quite a spiral of experience. I'm in conversation. I hear us all kind of in this space of flow and exploration and pioneering movement, in the sense that maybe something hasn't been done before, or we're doing it in our own way, and there's some form of connection that we find there that we want to share. Our passion is ignited, our fire's lit, and we're like, man, I just want to go share this. And in that process of wanting to share it, it's like, okay, wait, now I have to articulate in some way. I have to bring about this scenario, or this mentality in this space in some way. And I know you do it in your one-on-ones and in your mentorships. What kind of things do you pay attention to or look for to amplify that mentality, and bring it about more, whether it's through the empowerment and the encouragement, just the engagement of conversation? How do you invite more of that energy into the space?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I continue to explore and become more aware of, in a various settings, like my 1v1s, various mentorships, very specified most of the time, with like kettlebell juggling or mace work. So there's a deeper dive into one thing that gives you more of an experiential deep dive into building a relationship with that tool. And a couple things come to mind on how I like to guide someone on their own terms to more of a state of presence and maybe enjoyment with what they're doing in the craft, and kind of forging a curiosity for it. I think the first one is play and having fun. Every session is sort of an exploration of that. Every session is an opportunity to discover something new. when I was a kid, I would just climb everything, and I would explore. I'd be climbing trees. I'd be exploring rocks on the beach. And then I got very serious in my athletic pursuits, and I lost that. And then in recent years, I've sort of been aware of that and rediscovered the importance of that play and fun. So being childlike, not childish, but just childlike in that sense of let's explore, let's have fun. So I'm always striving to introduce that light-hearted state into training, which in my experience lets guards down. People don't have this sort of expectation of who they should be in a session, or this rigidity of what they want to get out of a session, or pressures on themselves to perform a certain way. There's just this, what is this? And this exploration of, all right, what are we learning now? And then let's slowly progress through different skills to explore more. Juggling in specific has been really fascinating to teach because it is so complex and very intimidating for a good reason. And so to really refine and break down the process of how to get from A to B, how to learn new skills, has been one of the best things I've ever done as a coach personally, is learn how to do that in a way that keeps people intrigued because they're not taking on too much, but they just get a little bit more of, like you mentioned before, that kind of dopamine hit of, oh, I achieved this. I achieved this small milestone. And then it just grows from there. So play and fun's a beautiful entry point that I'll guide people towards to experience that state of, let's call it presence, flow, although that's a very overused term. I use a lot. That means a lot of different things. And then I really put forth this notion of intentionality. Like whatever we're doing, can we just do it a little more intentional? Can you just become a little bit, we're not just learning a flip, let's say, and then keeping it at that and then moving on. It's like, let's do a lot of these. We're not going to count reps because then your mind is going to be focused on the reps. We're going to set a timer and we're just going to go through the motions of repeating the same movement over and over again with the intention to create more fluidity, to be, how can I make this movement feel a little more effortless, is a big word I'll throw in. And that often sort of tunes people into a different focal point than what they're used to in the conventional fitness realm. We're not trying to get stuff done. We're trying to be fully immersed in the process of what we're doing. Making movement beautiful, like it's big. If we have this intention of actually caring for how we're moving with the bell, like we actually, or a tool, like we actually care for how we're interacting with it. Right? We're not whipping it around or, giving it whiplash, which is oftentimes something that is seen in juggling. There's like a whipping, sort of like a wanting to force the bell to conform to your will or any tool, as opposed to, all right, like relative to this weight, how does this bell naturally fall through space? And let's just guide it with a little finesse with the arm, but forge that relationship. And so there's probably other things, but I think generally those are some themes. And then just as a coach, just my presence, I try and be very present and in that state of let's explore, let's have fun. One more I'll throw in there as well. That just flew out of my mind. It'll come up if it comes up.
I saw it. It's probably flying around somewhere in there now.
Where's that?
No, something you said about the being immersed in what you're doing on the other side of trying to get somewhere. There is a bridging that has to occur to get to that state, right? If somebody is in the state of, I need to get somewhere, I need to get somewhere, I need to get somewhere, that becomes quite taxing, because at
Hmm.
some point you're gonna be trying to get somewhere and you're not gonna get there with something that's too high of a skill, and we just haven't built the bridge to it yet. Or focus on something else, getting it done. I got my hour, get it done. I'm on to the next thing. But expanding upon each second and knowing that there's these little gap spaces that we can experience, and we see it all the time as coaches. Um, if somebody's used to talking quite a bit while they're moving, they're not quite plugged into communicating to their body, they're a little off balance, or little pieces are missing, that your body as a coach and somebody who's practiced this skill that you're teaching somebody else, you almost have this immediate connection to where your body's at in space relative to something in your environment. And then we might be picking it up. We're always picking it up unconsciously, but subconsciously there's little reference points of angles, and that's how I see it. There's this geometry to it, and the shape and the path and the angle and the
Hmm.
line, and there's these diagrams that are always around us. And as we start to flow, there is a point of getting there. You got a
Hmm.
checkpoint that you're looking for, a feeling that you're looking for,
Hmm.
and being able to just, you're not going to absorb it all right off the bat, but picking one thing, a constraint to just play with, whether it's, hey, we're going to keep your feet locked in here, or hey, I want one foot to stay locked in and another foot's going to move while you're holding the bell. And then we're gonna, start to add some pieces on top, like a swing or a clean or a press or whatever it is. And can we keep our awareness on that constraint while adding in another's piece? And I think that for me, what I see is it builds that bridge. You become immersed in the connection of the constraint, and then to the freedom of where you're going and what you're doing, but not necessarily the point to get there. Once you've established that checkpoint, it's the transition to it. It's that
Hmm.
gap space of one to the next. What happens in that in between? How are you? Because besides, I'm forcing the bell from one spot to another spot, and that transitional
Hmm.
space became like locked. Like there's an access point there in that sway from the kettlebells at equilibrium, and then you decide to swing it, and it finds another equilibrium point, a little float space.
Hmm.
And then what happens between that next space? It's almost as if we become more immersed, that space feels longer between those two checkpoints. There's more there to sure you dive into an awareness of it, but more so to breathe through, to
Hmm.
be with the path itself, as opposed to the position that you just got to. And there's this constant play of position and path, position and path, and position and path, and then opening up all these movement options, and then
Hmm.
saying, now I can plug myself in to my body and intend to get to that space. How can I get there? Well, there's many ways to get there. There's the ways you've traveled, and there's the ways you haven't traveled.
Hmm.
And then you take the path less traveled and you go, yeah, there was something there. I
Hmm.
lost constraint, or I lost the focus. And I find myself laughing quite a bit at myself going through this processing and going, it's almost like a little cosmic giggle of like, what's the point?
Uh,
But also, this is the point.
exactly.
And it's like, that's a fine line too. Don't try to dive into that because you've lost it. It's like, that is the point, right? So it is. And you continue on and continue on and continue on. And I mean, looking back at your journey, my journey from touching the bell for the first time to where it is
Hmm.
now, you go back to the simple stuff and it's so profound. A
Yeah.
squat, just holding the
Hmm.
bell in a racked position.
Hmm.
And I get poetic with it. I'm like, now that I've got a kid and stuff, it's like, all right, protect this baby,
Yes.
but let's play
Yes.
with this baby. What can we learn together?
I love that. It's I've used that analogy a few times before my daughter was born, and then afterwards in particular of like finding that sense of moving with ease and fluidity would be like if you were holding a baby. I don't recommend swinging a baby, but
Although
if
there's a
you
whole
were,
practice of swinging a baby.
I've seen
The Russians.
yeah, just full on flipping them.
What
I
are
was
you
looking at
doing?
that a couple of weeks ago. People sent me that and be like, dude, you'd probably be pretty good at this. I was
No wonder they're so athletic.
like, yeah, no doubt. Oh my goodness. Not yet. Not yet.
Wait for that head to get strong.
I know, the neck too.
Yeah.
If you were holding a baby, though, how would you go through space with it? I love the analogy of pushing a baby on a swing. Would you stiff arm that baby as it comes back, or would you meet it and then come back, making sure that we're not introducing any tension or stopping points, and we're just catching and releasing, absorbing equal force, and then pushing out? And that has always been a really beautiful analogy for how we can do something with care and attention, as well as being present to the moment. Because you got to be present to the momentum and the force that you're absorbing, that recoil point where you come to stillness, and then the returning of that energy forwards. And to some, that may be tricky to like tie into, okay, how would that relate to movement? But there's always a resistance acting on the body, and there's always usually resistance going against that weight as well, no matter what it is. If we're playing with bands or kettlebells or dumbbells, barbells, like, and so just to navigate that relationship with the weight you are moving more fluidly and in tune opens up so much beautiful space. And yeah, it's really fascinating. I love that you brought up the geometry point too. More and more, I appreciate your system of spherical movement, because I think it is true, simply put, that we have this beautiful sphere around us that we can move in so many different ways. And even just introducing that visual or that idea, people are like, wow, how much space am I occupying? And maybe I've just been going to the gym and using machines, like moving sagitally, and maybe I'm not occupying much space at all. And I think most people kind of come to understand that as they start to move with these tools that offer the access point to moving in more ways. They're like, wow, I was really kind of trapped on my rectangular yoga mat for a little bit. And the geometry itself is whatever tool you're moving with. We're always creating circles. Very rarely are we creating straight lines. There's always some part, if it's a tool you're using or your body, we're creating circles. And I was going to throw this in, the thing I forgot about, but paying attention to the quality of your geometry or circles as you're moving. Like, how do your circles look? If you're swinging a mace behind the back, or moving with the rope, or juggling a bell, like, how intentional are you creating that circular movement? And you can visually start to see it. And then you can see where you're tense, and so your circles turn to straight lines, and you're introducing tension and resistance where it's not needed. And then eventually we just like let go a little bit, build that relationship with the tool, and start to move a little more fluid. And it's a beautiful process. I think with something that is a very great practice to have in this modern day and age, for all weightlifting and forms of working out. But I do think that it's important to have some practice, physical, because that's what connects you to your body, where you put a little more intention and presence into it, and see it almost like as an art form, like a skill that we learn to develop. I think our capacities of learning, our skill of learning has diminished a little bit, because it's much harder to pour yourself into one thing without distraction and then just excavate it to see where it goes. And I had a buddy of mine who learned from one of his mentors that anything can be a path to enlightenment. Like, any one skill, any one pursuit can lead you all the way to enlightenment, in the sense of fully coming to a self-awareness and connection with yourself, connection with nature, because we're just refining slowly, with more detail, one thing, until there's just, it's infinite. As you know, the exploration of any one thing, even holding a bell in a rack position, there's just so much to explore there. if you choose and if you'd like to. And it's a rich way of living where we're living with more attention to depth instead of adding more things on. And yeah.
I'll tell you what, as you're drawing rainbows all over the screen, beautiful art, CJ. It took me to
Circles.
the show SpongeBob.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, imagination.
Right.
So it makes me think of, just and take another SpongeBob reference too. He's got like a magic
Uh-huh.
pencil or something and draws in space, and then it turns into a thing. And there's
Mm,
another show, old school, called Chalk Zone that reminds me of it too. Of
mm,
just, I don't know if you ever watched that one, but it, this magic
mm,
chalk, and you draw, and it creates the environment to then play within.
uh,
And you draw a circle, there's a hole, right? You draw a staircase, you go walk up the stairs.
mm,
And I tie this into the process of that infinite exploration in this sphere, is that we don't even know what's possible in there really.
mm,
It's the matter of excavating and finding out what you find there. Um,
mm,
and you can keep digging and say like, I found this path, and that might
mm,
take you somewhere. But everybody's got their own path within their sphere. And thinking about all this potential in space, it's a scary thing to consider the unknown infinite. When you really
mm,
think about it, you're like, I am so small and
mm,
so unaware. But
mm,
what am I aware of? And what space do I take up? Because that is true. And how can we start to
mm,
explore this space? I think it's a great starting point that we use is the geometry of it, and just taking yourself forward and back, or side to side, or in the angles in between, and then rotating through them. It starts to clear up where we can step, where we can go on the ground of our sphere when it's flat. And then also when you're on a slanted surface, going, something lower or something higher, we start to change the angle or the y-axis of
mm,
where you're stepping. And then that also applies to the upper body and where it can reach. And there's even more options because we're not
mm,
on our hands. And as soon as we start to change our angles, go into a prone position and start crawling around, and how that now completely shifts our perspective of this sphere, we start to paint our space with our
mm,
own efforts, our own movement. And in that, we are collecting a bunch of, the term that's going around is movement data.
mm.
So
I
our
like
body's
that.
picking up actual real experience that then it's going to process unconsciously. And we can play a part consciously. But as we start to paint and pave that space, we start to feel more embodied within our space. Like how I
Hmm.
view it is,
Yeah, well said.
we are our body, but our consciousness goes beyond our body. And how we play in that space is going to contribute to the overall energy of the space that space takes up. So it's not just the space you can reach to, it's you can also locomote and transfer that sphere to another space.
Mm,
And for me, it brings a lot of clarity just in how I'm present physically. And I know that how I am physically can alter the energy of the space. And I think of an example of like being at an airport, and I know I'm about to get on a flight and I'm going to get all cramped up and tight. I want to take up space. I want to open it up because I'm about to compress. So how
mm,
can I use a wall or
mm,
a chair to facilitate an intentional experience in my body, so that my body knows that, I know we're about to take you through, body. We're about to compress you. It's going to get
mm,
uncomfortable. But to not let that drift away from me if I don't do anything about it, where I feel compressed. I get off the plane and I'm like, some funkiness, and body's sending signals that it wants to expand. Is, learning how to just take up space wherever you are. You don't have to be in a gym. In fact,
mm,
it's a great place to intentionally focus, and you've got tools at your fingertips there. But now how do you carry that awareness outside or in another
mm,
environment? And is that still with you? And is this bridge of connection of the value of your practice, and how, wow, I'm actually training my body 24/7 and my brain 24/7. And this
mm,
space now that I'm practicing in, I'm carrying it with me. And it's like this stable rootedness. It's this fluid lightness, like water. It's this expressive passion, fire that it kind of generates out. And then it's
mm,
in the every breath you take. You're you're filling that space. And I think as we practice this, you start to recognize that your breath, yeah, I feel it here, but I feel it here. And if we can start to tap into that, recognizing how we react into
Mm,
different situations
mm,
in life, and noticing when we're feeling unstable or unsafe, when we're feeling very rigid and not
mm,
free to flow, when we're feeling guarded and not able to express, and when we feel like our breathing gets restricted. These are all little signals that our body gives us in a very indirect way, because it's not telling us exactly in English or whatever language you speak exactly what's going on. It's giving you a sensation, and that in a sense becomes sensational to everything else that we're experiencing, and
mm,
it just brings more vibrance and more of that vitality into our experience. But it comes through that exploration of that space that I think we can start to embody ourselves more in conversation, or in stillness and in quiet, just
mm,
observing. I find myself often like a coffee shop, and I go there now on purpose when I'm programming, so that I feel inspired by the space of movement and just people
mm,
living consciously and unconsciously. But it's this playful give and take, people in line. What's the proximity of how they're standing? What's the positions they take? How
mm,
aggressive are they moving to go order or to go grab their coffee? How am I right now while I'm observing? Am I so intent and not here that I'm externalizing? Um, it's this playful internal external that I think is developed through the act of moving through your sphere, which everything is. It's just to what extent and what purpose is it serving? And I think we can bring in more of that life purpose, lifestyle, and engagement and empowerment by just allowing ourselves to kind of surrender to what we're doing,
mm,
and then just
mm.
get back into it, and to push and pull and to feel that grind, but to also be there in the in between and go, like, how am I? Where am I? When am I? And just be
Yes.
reflective in that state. Do something, reflect, be with it. Um, there's a lot of power to it.
Mm, yeah, I love that. Many, many beautiful things. I made my mind sort of tick and click. And yeah, that was really beautiful. Breath is interesting. You know, having a baby daughter who's a week, 7 weeks old yesterday.
So excited for you, man.
I appreciate that. It's been beautiful. It's been so beautiful. Challenging. It's been all the things. It's been the perfect representation of the ebb and flow of trying to surrender, really absorb the beautiful moments, just cycling. One of the things that I became very aware of right away was when I hold my breath and the subtle tensions that happen when she's losing it because she might have gas at night. And I'm just like, well, where's my breath right now? Like it's high up in my chest.
Mm. To
To your point about, you know, the influence between our environment and self, can't remember if it was a quote or, or, or from whomever, but it was, we inform our space or we create our space and our space creates us. There's this constant sort of give and take. And when I'm holding my daughter Aya, you're very aware of that. You become aware of like, whoa, I'm feeling tense right now. Or maybe I just finished with a client, or, you know, I've been doing a lot of computer work and I try and shift gears too quickly. And I'm with her. I'm like, oh, I'm still carrying a lot of like whatever I had. And she's tense. And I know that whatever I'm feeling, even energetically, is influencing her. And so there's this very subtle piece of awareness that's been very informative and beautiful learning opportunity that I continue to dive into of what am I holding, even belief wise,
Mm.
tension wise, energetic wise, that is going to inevitably have an impact on her. And you know, how she's being, how does that influence me too? When we're out and about or in Walmart, like I feel, as I'm sure you do and old dads do, this sort of like sensitivity to your environment and be like, how is the music that's playing that person walking by? Like there's just this attunement to people's and places energy and that interaction with your baby. And that's been really fascinating as well. And I think it ties into all things in your movement practice. What are you taking into your movement practice? What energy or what state are you um, what energy or state is going to be shaping your movements that day? Maybe there's a reset that's needed before you start the move or before you coach. There is this beautiful, there's just a beautiful relational part to us human beings that's always online. We're relational beings. And we're always interacting with what we're doing, and what we're doing is interacting with us. And it's a beautiful give and take, ebb and flow of existence. Um, yeah.
A sense what you're talking about with the breath, especially from day
Hmm.
one, it's recommended to get skin to skin, and that
Hmm.
body heat and just the connection that goes through the skin and this osmosis of energy shifting. You feed each other. Um,
Hmm.
and even now, she's almost 2, and every night just having her cuddle in and lay
Hmm.
and feel her breath and feel my breath and recognize that tension, recognize the holding as we start to settle our own body and breathe, recognizing the syncing up that happens with the breath and the state of energy. You feel the calm, the settling, the grounding, the sinking. Um, there's something so powerful there that I think that we neglect to this day,
Hmm.
because we do have so much information beginning blasted at us and into our sphere, um, that if we don't have a process of dissolving that and
Hmm.
letting it go up in flames and just disappear, how it holds and we absorb, over time, that becomes a state of mind that becomes kind of sticky, stagnant, and um, misaligned with our true being of feeling that freedom and that ease. And it's a state of comfort, but you get to enough ease, your body gets uncomfortable and wants something that's a bit challenging or a bit uncomfortable, so that we can continue to have this feedback loop of what it feels like to calm and settle. Otherwise, we kind of can stay in kind of that beta wave state of, there's just a lot happening here. Can we get down and calm it so that we can rise again? Um, and I find that a lot with, when there is tension rising, or, little Athena's upset about something and can't communicate it. Just having that moment of not being reactive and trying to figure it out, but sit here and settle in the space and see what comes up. There's an answer there, or at least the next step. Something that comes from an aligned state versus a misaligned reactive that kind of builds and builds and builds, and nothing's really solved. It may just be compartmentalized. Um, when we give each other in conversation, each other in a group setting, in a work setting, with colleagues, with friends, that moment to breathe and just say, we are here now, and there's things that we need to deal with, um, and that's okay. Like whatever is going to be coming up, and things need to come up, but let's be able to process this from a state of awareness and observation, and listening, versus spewing back out what's coming back in. We're trying to almost refract it, or get it out of here, send another direction, versus let it pass through us, in terms of the energy or the emotion, or um, whatever signals arise in there. There's going to be some form of resistance because it's something other. But when we start to let it pass through us, we start to recognize our play in this space, and everybody's kind of got their part, um, tying that together, and bringing it back into the physical practice. Is, when are we forcing? When are we pushing? When is there so much information coming in? Maybe it's the music, maybe it's the surrounding people, to just take a moment and get back to connecting to what's true and what we're really doing, and that is where your intention meets your action, and what are you intending to do, and what are you actually doing, and continuing to kind of tap back into that present space, uh, it may not be a direct route to figuring something out, but it's a space to walk through so that you do have gap to process, to understand maybe more of an entirety of a situation versus just our viewpoint or our lens projecting. But that ability to listen, and it does come down to the breath and the give yourself a moment, let things come through and pass versus try to fight it, resist it. Where does that give and take allow you to go?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
having a 7-week-old at home, what are some of those kind of give and take moments of feeling, I don't know what to do here? And have you had that?
Mhm.
And how have you processed the path of understanding
Continue to learn for sure. I think our daughter is by far, I feel it, going to be my greatest teacher, our greatest teacher as parents. And there's been a lot of interesting moments I didn't expect to come out with her. One of them is that tension. She's losing it at night, and she's had bad gas the last while. And we'll go through episodes of like 2, sometimes 4 hours late at night. Some nights are great. 9:30 is sort of like when she'll settle and we have a beautiful sleep, and you'll never appreciate sleep as much as going through these initial phases. Um, but at that time of night, it's been really interesting to learn that there's no expectations for how things should go. She'll determine a lot of that, how things go in this particular phase. She's just so dependent. Um, and so in those moments later at night, when there is usually a less groundedness to myself, as in the day, I've usually processed a lot by that time. It's been really interesting to see what comes up when, I could be holding her for an hour and she could just be crying and screaming, and I'm just holding her and I'm there and I'm walking around. What tensions come up in my body, and how I can breathe and sort of let that out. Irritation's been something that has been really fascinating to see come up, that I feel I have had flashbacks, like how my father would have helped me in some strange way. Like there's a tethering there to how my father was, and having this sort of meeting of tension and irritation at a baby crying, which I'm assuming is also inevitable with all parents. Feeling that sense of like, oh, there really doesn't seem like there's anything to do. All the positions don't work. One thing that is a safeguard is the Dyson. She loves the Dyson, which has been a beautiful gift. On the diffuser, she just like she settles down in the sound of water. But how does one remain grounded and circulate that tension that could be yours, could be coming from her? A lot of times it is coming from her. How can I circulate that and not let it get stagnant, which is then when I feel it turns into those emotions of like irritation or anger or whatever it is when there's just like a compiling of that tension somewhere. And instead just circulating it. So that's been one that's been very interesting to become aware of and continue to learn from at night, especially when you're a little more vulnerable emotionally. Mama's tired, you're tired, and that becomes more of a vulnerable time. Um, one other give and take is the really, really beautiful moments when my mind might be wanting to think about something else or dive into the next task of the day, but she's just there and she is so present. And so it's almost a allowing of yourself to anchor into the moment with her, and just enjoy. that moment as it is, no expectations of how it should go or what you should be doing or not doing, fully releasing into just right now. And she's a beautiful tether for that because she's just present. She's literally just operating based on what's going on around her. And so through the challenges and also the really beautiful times, like deeply connecting with both. And I think that's been one of the many give and takes that have been really beautiful. Communication with my partner as well has been wonderful. That dynamic and learning how us three are, as you put really beautiful words to it. What is that sense of flow together? Three of us, we're still learning about that and figuring that one out and leaning into it. What does that support system look like? When can I support versus when I'm not quite needed? Or when can I support just mama as she's doing her thing? And that dynamic sort of web of alliance together is really beautiful. Something we continue to lean into, though.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful moments to be constantly shared.
Mm-hmm.
We were walking downtown to dinner last night, and we've got about a 10-minute walk. This is a big hill, and you drop down and you get into downtown slow. And about the top of the hill, right before you enter downtown, there's this big wall. It's about my height, and it kind of gets a little bit higher. And Athena looks at it, she points at it, and I was like, "Oh, you want to walk the wall?"
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Right. And just being present in the walk. I mean, we've carried her downtown all the time, but she's starting to like want to walk herself. And it's about a half mile, maybe a little bit longer. But we walk by this all the time, and I look at stuff and I just want to climb on it and walk all over it
Uh,
and bring that childlike mentality of like, oh yeah, I can walk on the sidewalk, but why not walk on the ledge, right? Or why not walk on the
mm-hmm.
curb? Why not do a spin move or a little skip? Right? We as a kid, we don't think about it. We just do it. And
Yeah.
when she points at that wall, I'm like, yeah, let's go. So I pick her up, set her up on the wall, and I'm like kind of spotting her, like with her hand, and she goes foot over foot, all the way down, like a good 30-foot chunk of wall that continues to get higher up, and I'm like below her. My wife's tripping out. My in-laws are like,
Uh,
oh, walking close. I'm like, don't worry, guys, she's got this. We practice on the low bar. This isn't her first time. It's her first time on this wall, but she wanted to do this. And she's so sure-footed coming across it. We come down and do a little gap and then go to the next wall and it's a little bit higher. And I'm like, all right, we'll do this last one. And then we finish the wall and I pick her up and she's just giggling. Like we're walking still to dinner. She's just laughing.
I
I'm like,
love that.
man, just that state of presence and play. And it's always available. It's just we
Mm-hmm.
need to shift our lens a little bit in order to recognize it. And um, it could be just a quick moment, but it's a moment that
Mm-hmm.
over time you continue to act upon. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very excited to see, how that plays out because somehow I became very, I maintained my play. And I think a lot of people lose their play. A lot of people come back to it too. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's this internal, I think, struggle for many that we've forgotten how to be imaginative. And I think the main thing is because there's no purpose to it. Like that's a quick
Mm-hmm.
firewall. Like, what's the purpose? I need to get where I'm going. It's like that's the point. We're always trying to get where we're going, always chasing
Mm-hmm.
something. Can we
Mm-hmm.
take a moment to just be immersed in the connectedness of this environment and this space?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want to do in it? And who cares? And maybe you don't even know, but you're just like, I feel like everybody has these little glimpses or ideas, but we've been trained out of it, of acting upon it because of either taking too much attention to ourselves, or the embarrassment of trying something, maybe not having the ability to articulate why, and we neglect that part of ourselves that's itching to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be awkward and funky the first few times getting back into it, but you start to feel that little rush or that breathing a little different, or now you're like wide-eyed, or you're now seeing something differently. You look at that tree differently. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it opens up this imaginative space that the universe always provides, but because of how we're looking at, or not, maybe not even looking at, we're looking at, we're not looking in or around. It's always towards something. You know, the inevitability is that we won't be able to at some point. So how can we squeeze the juice out of the moment and create that gap between moments, or that awareness of space between where we're going and what we're doing? It's not always about where we're going. It's like how we're doing it, you know, as we're going there. If we have that checkpoint, that doesn't end there. It's not like an end result, end game, or, you know, you get your goal and you hit your goal. But it was the process of achieving that was the most important thing. It wasn't the actual goal itself, because you may not achieve it, or you may achieve it, but what does that path continue to allow you to unfold within yourself? And what a beautiful experience parenthood is, because there's a lot of unknowns for everybody.
Yeah.
That we have the choice to be playful in a lot of this space. And things do come up. It's, you know, it's not necessarily about like what's wrong and what's right there, but paying attention to when we do have a moment of bliss and euphoria and presence, that not to necessarily hold on to that, but to create more opportunities so that that can be recreated and fostered in more parts of our life. So we're having more of these moments that we're paying attention to, that are like, I did this one thing, and because I did this one thing, I'm paying attention to this other thing differently. And then I was in conversation, and I wouldn't have ever brought up that statement had I not done that thing this morning, or that choice of walking the stairs backwards. There's moments that, like, that moment may not have been the most important piece, but what that moment allowed for was all these unfolding of other moments, simply because you paid attention to doing something a little bit outside of your regular patterning, out of routine. And that play becomes routine, where you're living in that more unknown space and just allowing the universe to provide. Put something out there, it's going to feed you back. And if you're paying attention enough, it's going to pay attention to you. And what is it? You got to go try it out for yourself.
I love that. Yeah, beautifully said. And I can feel the joy that which you embody when you speak of that and speak of your daughter's experience. And it's so real. And it just made me think about, you know, what would a world look like where people were just a little more lighthearted and act a little more spontaneously, with this sort of urge to just play a little bit more. Like, it would just change how all interactions are, all people are, and spaces. There is a cloud of seriousness across so much, and I think it's in part due to many different things, but choosing a sector of your life and infusing intentional play into it, I think is so important. And what that means is it's very different for different people. I believe curiosity is really important. Something I've always stayed true to, is doing the things that I have this inner yearning to just see, you know, just to explore. And that's triggered a lot of fear throughout my career as well as life, of like leaning into starting personal training 6 years ago now, and being like, all right, I'm gonna be a personal trainer and train people to do these general, you know, it could be weight loss, strength gain. Didn't really have anything specific. And then over time, gradually niching down, you know, being like, all right, well, following my curiosity, and that led me into movement flow, which was a system on the ground of like soft acrobatic movements, really beautiful. Calisthenics, did a lot of hand balancing, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to fully lean in towards this and allow myself to. And then that turned into so many tricking, did a lot of tricking, different flips, tying those together, and then the mace, and then the kettlebell, and then all of these things. They all eventually turned into offerings. And before I chose to offer each one, there was that moment of like, I don't know, should I stick with what's probably make me more money, which would, be a little more seen as okay in the public eye, or should I choose to lean into specifically what I love to do and trust that my infusion of play and passion into that is going to attract people who need that specific thing? And that continues to evolve, but it's been so rewarding and beautiful to see the kind of people that are attracted to that authentic sense of someone following their curiosity and choosing to live it out. Um, yeah, choose something. There's many entries into a beautiful movement practice. There's many entries into being physically fit. There's a lot of beautiful tools out there. And I think allowing your curiosity and intuitive nature to guide yourself towards something that you just have a question mark around. You just not sure what it is, but you like the way someone moves with this tool. You're like, oh, there's something there. You don't even have to label it. Lean in, get that thing, and just allow yourself to explore without expectation of where you're going to go with that tool. What the goal is. It's important to have landmarks, as you say, but I also love the idea of having a compass that is more in tune, like your compass of values that you want to live as you progress in a direction. For me, that's a sense of exploration, of this sense of like embodiedness. If I don't feel this sort of exploration of myself happening, or the sense of like being able to practice more fluidity and connection with the body, I just know myself well enough that I won't stick with that thing as long. Um, but knowing yourself in that sense, when you're at your best, when you feel that sense of play, what are you doing? What's going through your mind or emotions? And using those as a compass to guide you through in this case, or on this podcast, your movement journey specifically. And that will lead you into other things. It'll tie dots together. And um, yeah, it's a world of many beautiful options. And play, I think, is an essential ingredient to vitality itself.
The navigation, man, I think that's number one, because there is so many paths into
Mm-hmm.
a practice that, like you said, can kind of niche down into something that's more yours and individualized, and you feel very connected to your true north of I'm doing these handful of things or multitude of things, but there's this central alignment that it feeds into. It feeds into, and you feel
Mm-hmm.
this act of moving towards something,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily the act of getting there. It's just that being in the river that's moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not getting caught up on a rock or a tree branch that's fallen and then saying, I found it. It's like, no, the river
Mm-hmm.
still flows. You
Mm-hmm.
still gotta go through the river, or you're gonna get stuck, you're gonna get cold, you're gonna get swept away, and then allow yourself to be swept away. I find it extremely challenging with getting a new client coming in they're looking for something, or they've heard
Mm-hmm.
that this space, especially at Gymnasio, can offer them something.
Mm-hmm.
And it tends to be people in pain or some form of discomfort, or they're like the black sheep of fitness and they don't really have a space that they feel connected to and aligned with, because it may be solely focused on the fitness and the physique and the gains, right? The physical gains. Everything that you do
Mm-hmm.
physically is going to have some form of other mental and emotional gain potentially. But
Mm-hmm.
how is it facilitated in that session or with that tool? And I find this challenging, but extremely fun and challenging, is to help someone tap into their compass, their north. And I'm still trying to refine, working to refine a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can use this universal principle with somebody and then take them on a journey that I don't know where it's going to go, but I know it's going to go somewhere that hopefully amplifies that motivation or that energy to continue on and to develop,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's with me, with our coaches, or not even here. It's just something that they took from this session, this time, and then move forward with it.
Mhm.
A mentality or a state of being. And trying to figure out what that is the challenge, because you might have somebody brand new, you don't know what their past has been. You start diving into a little bit more of an intake and understanding their history, how they've trained, injuries they've experienced, things they enjoyed, things they really don't want to do again, and start to piece together kind of this more of a clear path of where we can continue to walk and be curious. Whether it's re-inviting stuff from their past. They were an athlete in a specific sport. We put that a movement,
Right.
put them through a movement that reinvigorates that play or that competitive drive or that, like, oh yeah, I remember this. Here, I see what this is gonna feel like, and not getting so bombarded by the, wow, I used to be able to do this much better, or the, man, I suck at this, or the, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's like, let's get around those, because that's real thoughts that are coming up, but we're getting into the depth of you just moving and being here, being present with it. So let's get out of the cobwebs of your mind that are telling you something that's not true. It's just playing from a story that you've been telling yourself that now you're starting to pay attention to, or you've been paying attention to it, but you've been trying to ignore it too, because it's just so much mental real estate that takes up of, I can't do this, I can't do that. I should be this, I should be that. And let's get to, like, let's just move. Let's to go through some simple stuff and start to just tap into your heart rate, your breath, your muscles, the feeling, and that feedback of what's actually happening here, so that you can start to trust your feelings again, as opposed to these thoughts that come from a state of being and feeling that you've identified with.
Yeah.
And the movement to help shake free some of those and dislodge some of those potentially stalemating kind of conversations, and just into, can you feel your body? Would you have done that yourself? Probably not, but now that you felt it and you recognize this, like, wow, I'm like breathing more open, like I feel a little taller, I feel like a little bit more capable, and not let the story come back of like, yeah, but you're not yet. It's like, that those things come up, but discovering that process, some form of movement prayer or some form of movement routine, some form of physical thing that you can do, that you choose to do. That probably the first challenge is just choosing to do it, and then actually doing it, starting it. Really, once you start every 5 or 10 minutes, it's like, okay, we're moving forward. Discovering what that true north is for somebody after a few sessions, and they start to go like, I really enjoyed this, and I want to learn more with this tool, and not getting caught up so much in the fitness components, and I have to have these pieces, because that's all secondary and tertiary things that we can add on, or become a byproduct of just the practice of you focusing and moving physically, that you turn into some upper body, low body core, something that just kind of starts building that bridge into the freedom to just express with a tool, or just with your body. The tool can help that, but what about when you don't have the tool in your hands? How do you carry yourself forth? Where do you start with somebody developing that compass? And we've got a little bit of time left, but in recognition, what kind of things are you looking for as a coach, as a mentor, as a guide, that you can start to utilize in conversation with this person, maybe with a group of people, or they start to recognize their own compass? Because you can only take them so far, and then they got to take themselves beyond. Otherwise, then it just becomes a copycat mirror, which is helpful to start, but never really allows you to dive into your own weeds and bring stuff out. What are you looking for in developing that compass?
When you were talking, I was asking that same question, kind of using it as a framework to learn about how you would answer that question too. So I appreciate that. That's great. Continues to evolve, as all things. I think guiding someone towards their own intrinsic wanting takes a lot of presence with them. You know, one thing that has really helped, and I had moments of a lot of gratitude listening to you, was because of my own curiosity and explorations of things I found interesting. It's led me to develop a really beautiful repertoire of ways of moving. I can kind of symbolize different feelings, states of being, this, that. And so when someone comes in, I'm not looking through a lens of only one movement discipline, or, you know, if you've only been interested in barbell lifts, that's what you're going to coach your clients. There's not as much room for you to dive into what they may uniquely be inspired towards, which may lead them elsewhere. So I had a moment of gratitude for that. And when a new client comes in, specifically when I do in-person clients here in Victoria, I work at a clinic. Learned a lot. It's been a beautiful place. And there's less of a avatar that I've attracted. Like through Instagram, when someone comes, he's like, all right, well, he does a lot of kettlebells. He does a lot of mace. That's what I want to do. So there's more of like a specific crowd that's introduced. And that's usually what they're inspired by. That's usually what they want to learn, because I embody that and I'm fully in that thing. But in the clinic setting, when someone comes in and they haven't seen anything on Instagram, I'm just a trainer to them. I like to get them very curious about, you know, where do you see yourself after having gone through whatever training you expect to get? You know, what are you now doing? How do you now feel? And sort of curating that state of being that they want to embody somewhere down the line. And sometimes that's specific activities. Sometimes that's a feeling of just wanting to feel more strong and grounded, or a feeling of being too tight and trapped and needing to practice more fluidity and sort of loosen up. And so I tend to pay attention to the how someone's coming in and holding themselves, how they move, and how they express they sort of need. Usually there's opposites. Again, that sort of yin and yang. Too much strength or too much rigidity, not enough. Too relaxed, too yin, not enough yang. And so there's an energy component I'll pay attention to. And then I really believe in being a shepherd as opposed to having a plan of attack for them. Like, I'm very upfront, being like, I don't plan a lot of these sessions. There are times, if I know you well enough, that I can plan out what points to hit in the session. But I think as soon as you have a plan, you can prevent yourself from being present with what your client needs in the moment, or based on the day, the day's going. And I have a lot of different tools that clients can kind of gear themselves towards. Sometimes it's just body weight. Sometimes it's leaning towards a kettlebell because they express that they want to move a little more with their whole body. They want a tool that, a lot of the times, is they want a convenient tool that they can work out at home because they don't like the gym environment. So it's like, kettlebell's amazing for that. You only need one tool, and it really does tick a lot of boxes. Not all of them, but it's a wonderful tool, versatile tool, in my opinion, that can take a lot. And so they lean towards that. They develop skills with the kettlebell. They're like, this is amazing. We can work the full body at once, and I can do it in my backyard. And that inspires their sort of own pursuit. Inspiring someone's own intrinsic desire for taking care of themselves, vitality wise, I think is somehow sparking that sense of fun and play, like getting them excited about what they could do, or who they could be, what activities they could do, because of what they're exploring, movement wise, connection wise. Um, I'll usually get some quick wins, teaching people how to really connect with their core, their pelvis, their ribs, and that whole torso area with their breath. And as they're moving in very simple movements like our deadlift, lunge, squat, push, pull, use Paul Chek's framework of those fundamental movement patterns. And sometimes just getting those quick wins, like coordinating and centering into that central navigating part of the body, the core, and learning how to do a lunge or a squat or a deadlift or a push or pull sometimes blows people's minds because they're so disconnected from that part of their body. And so that's a really cool way to start for a lot of clients who are new, just connected them to like that essential coordinating part of the body. And then yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. It just creates more questions because it's so dependent on and who the client is. But I think inspiring a sense of curiosity is probably what I'd sum it up to. And then that's what actually drives them asking their own questions, which paints pictures, which attracts action, which then self-propels.
Beautifully said, brother. I'm humbled by your power.
Mhm.
It's awesome. Brother, I could chat with you for hours. We're definitely gonna do this again, and
Mhm.
I want to dive in more next time. I think into that developing the compass, because I think a lot of
Mhm.
coaches and movers will resonate with that conversation, and I really want to hear about more people's compasses too. Just
Same
how,
here.
yeah, we
Yeah.
navigate space with our own practice, and what are the simple things, what are the complex things, what are we still working on, and where we're going. So I appreciate you kind of diving into that and the intrinsic nature of curiosity and how that can continue to be a guiding light, a buoy for
Mhm.
everybody. So
Mhm.
really appreciate you, man, and your time. Hope everybody else
Thank
enjoyed the
you.
conversation too, and got some
Mhm.
beautiful golden nuggets from it, because there's a lot of juice there.
Mhm. Yeah, that was fun. Thank you. Thank you for your curiosity too, and your willingness to learn.
You got it, man. Well, Sean, thank you for being on the show, my man. You will be doing you're doing a mentorship coming up here. You're currently in a mentorship.
I've got an online introduction to kettlebell juggling happening June 8th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. PST. It's my current online offering. I do mentorships, but people can jump on the gram and learn more about those offerings there.
Yeah, at Sean.Pearse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right on, man. Well, you guys go check out Sean's stuff. If you're interested in developing a compass, especially with the kettlebell, Sean's your guy. If you're looking at more spherical movement stuff, Sean does have a course with the kettlebell that explores the
Mm-hmm.
sphere. And with Gymnasio EDU, we have a outline for the spherical movement, just getting used to three-dimensionalizing lunges, squats, different reaches and swings, and connecting with your sphere in a multitude of ways. Highly encourage you guys to check it out because it's something that's going to be a beautiful framework to build off of with any tool you use, and get you out of any kind of rut and stagnant spot that you feel like, I just don't know how to move my body anymore. It's broken down.
Mm-hmm.
Start exploring the sphere, and your body will give you some amazing signals. And it's just the act of continuing to be curious about where in your sphere you can access and where you currently feel you cannot. But please go check that out. If you got questions, please reach out to me too on Instagram at Movement Exploration Channel. But until next time, you guys, happy moving and cheers.